Hey everybody, I finally finished Carl Sagan's Broca's Brain, Reflections on the Romance of Science. So this is a book of essays, some of which were published in other places, but which he put together, and they're all about science, mostly astronomy and cosmology, because it's Carl Sagan. But I really liked it. I think my favorite stuff were the essays that he did on different kinds of pseudoscience and like fringe science, he calls it, and how important he thinks it is for scientists to kind of take that kind of stuff seriously and put serious effort into explaining why it's incorrect. Because like people who latch on to those sorts of pseudoscientific beliefs, they're kind of doing it out of a sense of of curiosity about reality. They just don't really know enough information or enough about logical thinking or whatever to really parse why that stuff's not real. And so scientists should, take it seriously, whatever, instead of just making fun of it. Although making fun is fun. But he writes this whole entire essay where he's just I'm going to break down why this book by this guy who believes in catastrophism is incorrect. And it's just this whole thing. The guy's theory is basically that Venus came shooting out of Jupiter one day and is an asteroid and also came out of Jupiter. So it doesn't make any fucking sense. But, it was a fun essay to read. So that was my favorite part. And some of them were long, some of them were short. He talks about speculations of the future of astronomy, especially. It's interesting too because some of the things he speculates on have happened. I mean, he was writing this mostly before the Mars rovers. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and I'm glad I read it. And what was I saying? Sorry. Oh right, I was saying I think I know a little bit more about astronomy, and so it was easier to read this book and recognize the things that were out of date. Although largely they were stuff where he would say, we haven't done this thing yet, and I'd be like, oh ho ho, but you have. It also made me really sad because I was just sitting there reading this, Carl Sagan would have been so excited to see all those beautiful high-resolution pictures of Pluto, and he didn't get to. So, anyway, I depressed myself, but, I liked reading it. And, thusly, I have finally finished the third book of my challenge. Oh boy, I'm behind. But we're gonna pick a new one. Okay. Oh my stupid... They're getting dusty in here. Alright, please be short. The Fantastic Voyage. Ooh, okay. I'm a fan. Alright. Okay, here it is. The Fantastic Voyage. It's by Isaac Asimov, and my understanding of this book is that it's actually a... how do I put it? It's a novelization, essentially, of a movie, The Fantastic Voyage. And I only really know that because he mentioned it in, I think it was an interview I watched. So, yeah, it's, okay, so it says he's written a fast-paced, imaginative thriller based on the original story by Otto Clement and J. Louis Bixby, and on a screenplay by Harry Kleiner. So the movie came first, or at least the screenplay came first. And this is about some people miniaturize themselves and go in a little vehicle doohickey inside somebody's bloodstream, presumably to save his life, I think. So it's going to be some very fun magic school bus nonsense, essentially. Yeah, okay, great. A good choice. I'm excited. I also love how these page ends are red, but the rest of them are just normal. I don't know what's going on there. Let's see what it looks like without a dust jacket. It looks boring. This is the worst color. Alright. I'm very excited to read this, especially since it's 239 pages long. Oh. Alright, see y'all later. Hello? Today I finished listening to I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. One woman's obsessive search for the Golden State Killer. So, this book was published like last year, and they actually caught the guy. That's the thing that I think is really cool. Like, back up. This is a nonfiction book about a investigative journalist, very interested in cold case and like serial killer, like unsolved murder mysteries. Ran a website called truecrimediary.com, and got obsessed with the case of this man who raped like 50 people or something in Northern California, in like the Sacramento, East Bay area of California in the 80s, I think, or late 70s into the 80s, and also murdered like 10 people or so in LA, and hadn't been caught. And so she was really just fascinated by attempting to investigate and eventually hopefully catch this killer. And unfortunately she died before she finished writing the book, and they still published it. It was put together basically by a couple of people who are also helping her with the research, and it has a foreword and an introduction and an afterword and all this stuff, and it is a really good book. I didn't know anything about this particular murderer, except what I read in the news when he was caught last year. So that is not mentioned in this book. That happened before this book was written, what am I saying? That happened after this book was written, obviously. After the book was written. I don't know if there was a connection between some of her work and them eventually being able to catch the guy. It's possible that, like, there was some stuff kind of right at the end of this book where they were talking about, because the book is mostly from her perspective, but then the last section is clearly written after her death, and mentions that she died and talks about like the guy, these two research assistants, the editor and whatever. So they were talking about the impact that she had on some of the people who are still working on the investigation, and just that she was helpful, and that she was kind of reinvigorated some of them. And like, it's just really nice to get to the end of this book, and the afterword is by Patton Oswalt, who is her husband, and is also recorded by him. And he says, like, that he hopes that they catch the guy, what blah blah, and then, like, it's just nice listening to that, knowing that they did catch the guy. My understanding, from what I remember having read about it at the time, was that they caught him using, like, genealogy websites, like DNA from those, which is a technique that this book does talk about. So that's also interesting. And yeah, it was a really good book. It is now the second audio book I have listened to about a serial rapist. The other guy didn't murder anybody. This book I think I liked this book better, but sadly it is somewhat unfinished. Like, there are sections where there's just like, editor's note, we pieced this together from a different article she published in this place, and bought, like, so like she didn't finish writing it, and I think, I don't know, it's sad, but yeah, it's a good book, and I totally recommend reading it, and I even recommend listening to it. I liked listening to it. So that's about all I've got to say about that, I guess. Yeah, I mean, Michelle McNamara seems like a smart and really obsessively dedicated person, and it's too bad that she didn't get to see the guy get caught, but what matters, I suppose, is that he got caught at all. So yeah, in conclusion, it was a good book. Well, I'm doing pretty good so far in April because I finished a third book, The Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch by Philip K. Dick. So one of my semi-formal goals this year was to actually read something else by Philip K. Dick, because it's been like 5 or 6 years since the last time I did that, which is an insane amount of time. Like, I feel like when I read one of his books, I need time to recover, like, mentally, because they're all such a fucking trip, but, you know, 6 years is way too long. So this one, because of the title, always stood out to me. I was curious, so I have finally read it. It is very strange. There's a lot of drugs. I don't really even know how to describe it, but, like, essentially, it's the future, and the UN forces people to be colonists on Mars and various other worlds of the solar system in order to, like, cultivate them, but nobody ever seems to really do anything. They just live there, and then they all do this illegal drug called Candy, which, like, transports them, at least mentally, into a vision of past Earth, where they sort of inhabit these sort of Barbie and Ken type characters, and then they can do whatever, but it's very limited. Like, they have to buy these little models, like almost these little doll houses, so that they can have those things within, like, the hallucinatory reality. And then this guy Palmer Eldritch comes back from a 10-year journey into space, and he's got this new drug, and it's purportedly even more of an experience. And then, like, the characters, then it just starts getting exceedingly weird. Like, the weirder the book got, the more I was into it, so that's good. And it has an extremely strange ending. And I think you're kind of going to be left with just, like, I'm not sure if the logic of this holds up, but whatever. I enjoyed it. Not as much as some other Philip K. Dick books I've read, but, I mean, I'd say for reference, my favorite was A Scanner Darkly, which is kind of similar because there's the whole what is reality and what is not, and drugs. So I was kind of expecting that. And there's also some interesting things about religion in here, or about what is God and belief and stuff like that. And it's very weird, and I'm glad I read it. And it was not nominated for the Nebula Award, apparently. Yeah. So, I mean, definitely want to read more of his, but not like this instant. Hey there, Cibola Burn, Expanse number 4 by James S.A. Corey. I did it. How big this fucking book is. Okay, so yeah, this was fantastic. I don't know, I mean, I'm gonna, like, just run out of things to say about this series, because I don't want to just yak about spoilers the whole time, really. But, I really liked this one. Yes, after reading the third book, I was thinking, okay, they're gonna have to, you know, logically go through the rings next, and one of the rings next, and, like, go to a new planet, and that's what they did. And then some nonsense happened, and a whole lot of, like, just really crazy stuff. Like, it was, like, one disaster after another. And there would be, like, a couple chapters where they were getting their breath back and figuring out, okay, how do we deal with this disaster? And then, like, there would just be another one. And some of them were because of the planet, and other ones were because of the people being assholes. And lots of stuff. I'm also super stoked because the epilogue was from Ava Sarala's perspective, and I fucking love her. And she's getting Bobby to, like, help her with something, and so I'm like, oh yeah, maybe they'll be in the next book. I don't know. I was, like, I'm not 100% sure that the whole seeking the strange godlike eldritch aliens that destroyed the other godlike eldritch aliens. Like, I'm not sure that's entirely been concluded, but it does sort of feel like it has been, which is like, really? In one book? What? But, I mean, they don't know anything about them, but, like, Miller's part of the kind of investigation, I guess, seems to be over. Like, he seems to be gone now. I love how I'm like, I don't want to just talk about spoilers, and then that's all I do. It's kind of a major spoiler. And of course I'm depressed about that because I like Miller. But, you know, whatever. So I just have no clue what the next book is going to be about. Although, I guess, okay, not no clue, but I guess my guess would be some more about, like, the political issues basically that get raised by Avasarala in the epilogue. So, like, everybody is going to want to leave, especially going to want to leave Mars. But it's also kind of like, that's nice, but, like, really, who cares? So I am extremely stoked for book 5, whatever that one's called. And I'm just super loving reading the series, and I'm very glad that I started. And, I do want to watch the show, because people have asked, or at least someone asked at some point, but I kind of want to read all the books first. Like, my understanding is there's 8 books, and I don't know if there are going to be more, but I kind of figure I want to read the 8 that exist, and then I will probably watch the show when I feel like it. Like, I do want to watch it, just, I also want to watch Battlestar Galactica, and I've been saying that for, like, fucking 10 years? Longer, actually. It's probably been like 12 years now, which, oh, Jesus. Yeah, so it takes me a long time to get around to doing stuff. Even stuff that I want to do. But it will not take me a long time to get around to reading book 5 of this series. But I've got a few books I want to read first, and that's basically what I say every time, but I've kind of got, I kind of have the next couple mapped out, because I just feel like, I can't just sit down and read the entirety of The Expanse one after another, right? I have to pace myself a little bit. Yeah, so I really liked this book, and I kind of felt like I I felt like this one worked, like, just really well in having, how shall I put this? I felt like in book 3, the sort of climax went on for a really long time. In this book, I felt like the climax was paced better, although I think because a lot of the book is all of these different crises happening, but, like, the actual climactic events aren't quite the same thing. Whatever. This was a really good book. And, super looking forward to the next one. I already said that like 5 times, but it is extremely true. So, I'll see you when I see ya. Hello. It is the last day of April, and sliding in just under the wire, I have finished 2 books. So, that's, I think, 6 books this month, so that's actually pretty impressive for me. But, I'm just gonna do them together. The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This is a young adult book. It's, pretty famous, so you've probably heard of it. But, it's historical fiction about a little girl growing up in Nazi Germany, basically, and it's narrated by Death, and that was the thing that intrigued me about it. I always heard it was good, so I wanted to read it because Death was that's interesting that Death is narrating it, and it was interesting. I mean, it was a good book. I wouldn't say that it was amazing or anything. I don't know. For me, at least, it's like a lot of it was just her life. with her parents, who are her foster parents, and like her best friend, and she steals some books. And it's not terribly interesting, but like I guess that's kind of the point, because they're living such regular lives in the shadow of just all the unpleasant things that do happen, like basically usually to other people in the background, or march down their street. And then there's the air raids and whatnot, and it was like a really depressing book. Like large swaths of it were perfectly happy, but like basically because Death is narrating it, you go into it knowing that there's going to be like, okay, because the whole beginning of the book, Death explains that there's this girl that he ran into 3 different times when he was picking up other souls, and she happened to be there, and that he got this book that she wrote about herself and about her life, and has carried it around with him for decades, and now wants to tell the story about her because the book is getting old and it's like the words are fading, and so he wants to like preserve it this way. So there's several points where Death talks about how such and such a character is going to die at this point, or died at this point, or whatever, but like, so it's interesting so that you kind of know what's going to happen to some degree. It was a good book. Just, I guess I was expecting something slightly different than what I got. Like, I guess I was expecting Death to take more of an active role in the story, which is kind of a weird thing to expect, but I mean, I guess really nobody's gonna be able to live up to Pratchett's death in Discworld, so no one should, to even try. But yeah, it really is good. Yeah. She didn't even steal that many books. It makes it sound like she steals a lot of books. She steals like 5 books. It's fine. That's more books than I've ever stolen, but yeah, anyway, it's a good book. Okay, Fantastic Voyage by Isaac Asimov. I did it. Yeah, this one I read really quickly, actually. It only took me like a few days. It was fine. I don't know. Like, the basic premise is, yeah, that, there's this, like, it's kind of a Cold War story. It's set, I mean, it was written in the 60s, but it's set kind of in the future, which I'm not sure how far in the future it's supposed to be, though. Not very far, maybe the 80s. And instead of having an arms race about nuclear weapons, like, that's progressed into this arms race that's completely secret about, like, miniaturization. So this Soviet, but they never say Soviet at all, by the way. The entire book just is, like, them, the other side, which is interesting. I mean, they're all very obviously, like, Americans, but the countries are never mentioned. So, like, theoretically, I guess, it could be any 2 world sort of superpowers. It could even be set, like, ridiculously far in the future or something. I don't know. I'm just speculating here. Maybe I'm trying to make it more interesting than it is. But no, I mean, it's based on a screenplay for this movie, which I haven't seen, but, like, when I'm reading it, it's like, my god, yeah, this is a movie from the 60s, that's for fucking sure. But yeah, so there's this scientist who defects from the other side and basically has the information for how to, like, stay miniaturized indefinitely, but then there's an attempted assassination before he can even get to the headquarters of these people. And they have to emergency surgery, a clot in his brain, but they can't do it. There's no way to do it using like normal surgery techniques. They have to try this insane plan to miniaturize this little submarine and some people, obviously, and have them navigate his bloodstream to get to this clot. And it actually is a pretty exciting story once they get to that point. Like, I really enjoyed the parts where, especially the part where they're in the lung, and that was really cool. It's just like getting to all the fun bits where they're basically like, well, how would this, provided you could miniaturize people to a certain size, like how would stuff like that work? The sexism was extremely grating, which like is pretty typical for older sci-fi, yes, but somehow this one was like more annoying than usual. I think partly because it is based on a screenplay. I don't know, like it just seems to me like books tend to be less irritating, but movies are just like the worst sometimes. Like, it's just very annoying, like all this like focused on the assistant of the scientist or the doctor who is going to do like the actual surgery once they're in there, and just the way that the characters treat her is just infuriating. It's so annoying. And yeah, like, yeah, and you spend almost the whole time in the head of this, like, secret agent, well, not really, but, like, and he who's on the ship, and his relationship with the woman is irritating. I think it might almost be less irritating if you weren't seeing the way he was thinking, but, whatever. So that was annoying. But it was pretty exciting whenever they were actually, like, doing stuff. But like, ultimately, there's some stuff I couldn't take very seriously. Like, essentially, some stuff about white blood cells and antibodies, like, I may have forgotten a lot of my immunology, but I remember enough to know that that's not how that works. Which, you know, to be fair, immunology is a really complicated field that certainly isn't fully understood now, so God knows how much they didn't know in the 60s. So, like, I mean, I forgive them for that, but, like, I'm still reading it, and I'm like, that's not how antibodies, no. They're like, there's, like, this part at the end where the white blood cells are, like, chasing them, and I'm like, what the fuck? That's not how anything works! But, it's fine. That's just something that I had to notice. Okay. So, done with that, and now it's time to pick a new book for my exciting challenge. Okay. The Fannie Mae Chicago mug. It's ready. I've never drunk out of this. Okay, please. The Climb. Ooh, The Climb. Alright, y'all, The Climb. Okay, here we are. The Climb. Ooh, it's got pictures. Okay, The Climb. It's Tragic Ambitions on Everest by Anatoly Bukreev and G. Weston DeWald. Okay, I'm assuming the second guy was probably just a co-writer and wasn't actually there. Because it says the first guide had Everest Expedition Guide. Alright, okay, as the climbers of the 1996 Mount Everest disaster vanished into thin air, one man had the courage to bring them down alive. This is going to be exciting. I'm actually pretty curious. I love that the picture they include of the author, he's like fully done up in his goggles and shit. Okay, yeah, I'm glad. I was looking forward to this one.